My name is Laura Keene. I'm 34 years old, and for 6 months I made my husband's dinner every night knowing exactly what he was. I packed his lunch on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I attended his company events and shook his colleagues' hands and smiled at the right moments. I helped our son with his homework at the kitchen table while Ryan sat across from us reading something on his phone, and I looked at his face and I thought about the apartment on Wicker Park, and I said nothing. For 6 months I said nothing because I was not ready. And because a woman who has spent 12 years building a financial career knows that the difference between a good outcome and a catastrophic one is preparation. And I was not going to move until I was prepared. I need to start at the beginning, which is also the end of something, which is how these stories always work. Ryan and I met in 2012 at a work event. He was in corporate development. I was 2 years into my analyst role at a mid-sized investment firm on Michigan Avenue. He was funny and attentive, and the kind of person who makes you feel chosen, which I understand now is a skill some people have that operates independently of their character. We dated for 2 years. We got married in October 2014 in a ceremony that cost $41,000 and that I have photographs of in an album I have moved to the top shelf of the guest room closet where I do not have to see it unless I am looking for it. We have 2 children. Theo is 7, Maya is 5. They are the reason for every decision I made in the 6 months between finding out and doing something about it, and they are the reason I am still standing in a position to tell this story at all. I am a financial analyst. I have been for 11 years. My specific area is forensic financial analysis. I look at transactions and structures and patterns, and I find the things that are not where they are supposed to be. I am good at this in the specific way that some people are good at things that require both technical precision and a particular quality of attention. The ability to hold a large number of variables simultaneously and notice when one of them doesn't fit. I am telling you this because it is relevant to how the 8 years worked and how the discovery happened, and why Ryan did not understand what he was dealing with when he decided to hide $340,000 from a forensic financial analyst. The marriage was good for the first 4 years. I believe this. I have reviewed the memory of it carefully from multiple angles, and I believe the first 4 years were genuinely good. Not without friction, not without the ordinary difficulties of 2 people building a life together, but good in the fundamental sense of 2 people who wanted the same things and were working toward them together. Theo was born in 2017, Maya in 2019. The pandemic years were hard in the ways the pandemic years were hard for everyone, and in some additional ways that I attributed at the time to stress and proximity and the specific pressure of 2 working. Parents with small children in a lockdown apartment. I attributed a great deal to those years. I understand now that attribution was convenient for someone. The first thing I noticed was in October 2022, a transfer from our joint savings account of $4,200 to an account I did not recognize. I noticed it the way I noticed things, not with alarm, initially, but with attention, a professional notation in my internal ledger. I asked Ryan about it. He said it was a deposit for a client entertainment account through work, that he had mentioned it and I had forgotten that he would send me the details later. He sent me a document later that week that looked correct, the right letterhead, the right account formatting. I filed it. I did not forget it. Between October 2022 and April 2003, there were 11 more transfers, varying amounts, $4,000 here, $6,000 there, once $12,000 in a single transaction that Ryan explained as a conference expense reimbursement flowing through a holding account. The explanations were always plausible. They were the explanations of someone who had been doing this long enough to have good explanations ready. The total across those 7 months was $63,000. I had noted every one. I had not yet said anything because I did not yet have a complete picture, and I do not move on incomplete pictures. April 2023, I was working late on a Thursday. Ryan had texted to say he was at a client dinner and would be home after 10. At 8:15, I was reviewing a client file and I ran a standard financial trace tool on a set of account numbers. Routine work. Not related to Ryan, not related to anything personal. One of the account numbers that came up in a cross-reference was the account the $4,200 had gone to in October. I looked at it for a long time. Then I ran it again. Then I ran it 3 more ways. The account was a personal checking account. It had been opened in April 2017. The primary account holder was Ryan Keene. The secondary address associated with the account was an apartment on North Damon Avenue in Wicker Park. Our home address is in Lincoln Park. They are 4 miles apart. I sat at my desk for a long time. I have tried to remember exactly what I felt in that moment, and the closest I can get is that it was very quiet inside me, not numb, not shocked exactly. More like a person in a high place looking at a long distance and understanding the scale of what they are seeing without yet knowing what to do about it. I wrote the account number and the address in a notebook. I closed the file. I drove home. Ryan was already back from his client dinner. He was on the couch watching something. I sat beside him. He put his arm around me. I watched the rest of the show with him, and then we went to bed and I lay in the dark for 4 hours and thought about April 2017, which was the same month I had found out I was pregnant with Theo. I did not tell anyone for 3 weeks. I needed to understand the full picture before I moved, and I needed to understand it without Ryan knowing I was looking. I have professional tools and professional access that I used carefully and within the limits of what is legally permissible. I want to be precise about that because precision matters here. What I found over the following 3 weeks was a financial architecture that had been constructed over 8 years with considerable care. A personal checking account, a personal savings account, 2 credit cards in Ryan's name only, and a lease on a 1-bedroom apartment on North Damen Avenue that had been renewed annually since 2017. The total amount moved from various shared accounts and redirected through this structure over 8 years was, by my calculation, $342,000. I calculated it 4 times. The number did not change, the apartment. I drove past it once. I want to be honest about this. I drove past it on a Saturday morning in May while Ryan was at a soccer game with Theo, and I sat across the street in my car and looked at the building for approximately 15 minutes. It is a 6-story brick building, the kind Chicago has thousands of, with a coffee shop on the ground floor and a dry cleaner next to it. Second floor, corner unit, based on the lease documents. I did not go inside. I did not need to. I had enough. I drove home and made lunch for Maya and did not think about the building again in any way that was not practical. In May, I called a divorce attorney named Susan Farrell, whose name I had gotten from a colleague who had used her 2 years earlier. I told Susan what I had found. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, "Laura, this is a significant financial fraud case in addition to a divorce case, and the 2 need to be handled in coordination." She referred me to a forensic accountant named David Chin, who works with family law cases involving financial concealment. I met with David in June. I gave him everything I had. He spent 3 weeks conducting his own independent analysis. His findings aligned with mine to within approximately $4,000, which he attributed to transactions he had not yet fully traced. He said in a meeting in his office on a Tuesday afternoon that what Ryan had done was methodical and sustained, and that the documentation trail was unusually complete. He said, "You caught this because you know what to look for." I said, "Yes." The legal preparation took 4 months. Susan and David worked in parallel. Asset protection measures were put in place quietly. I am not going to detail these specifically, but I will say that by September 2023, the financial structure of our household had been assessed, documented, and positioned in ways that protected my interest and our children's interest without triggering anything that would alert Ryan to what was happening. I continued to go to work. I continued to make dinner. I continued to attend Ryan's company events. There were 2 in that period, a summer rooftop gathering and a client reception in August. And I smiled and shook hands and asked colleagues about their summers and their families, and I thought about the apartment on North Damen Avenue, and I said nothing. I want to try to describe what those 6 months were like, because I think people assume that carrying that kind of knowledge is primarily about anger. It was not primarily about anger. It was primarily about Theo and Maya. I thought about them constantly, not in an anguished way, but in a planning way, the way I approach any problem that matters. What does the transition look like? What do they need to understand, and when and how? What does their life look like in 2 years and 5 years? I spoke to a child psychologist named Dr. Marcus in August before Ryan knew anything, and I began to understand what the research says about how children process family transitions and what the factors are that determine their long-term outcomes. Dr. Marcus said the most important factor is the stability and consistency of the primary caregiver. I am the primary caregiver. I intend to remain so. Ryan's company annual gala was October 19th, 2023. The firm's largest event of the year, 200 people, the Drake Hotel. A Saturday evening. Ryan had been looking forward to it for weeks. He was being considered for a senior vice president promotion, and the gala was the kind of event where visibility mattered. I wore a green dress I had bought specifically for the occasion. Ryan said I looked beautiful when I came downstairs. I said thank you. We rode to the hotel in a car he had ordered, and I looked out the window at the city and I thought, this is the last time. I had told Susan the previous Monday that I was ready. She had filed the initial petition that Friday. The process server had instructions to serve Ryan at our home address on Monday morning, 2 days after the gala. I had arranged for my mother to take the children for the weekend. I had told her we had an event and would appreciate the help, which was true in the most literal sense available to me. Everything was in place. The gala was not where I planned to say anything dramatic. That is not actually what happened. What happened was quieter and more specific than that, and I think more honest. We arrived at the Drake at 7. Ryan moved through the room with the ease of someone who was comfortable being seen, stopping at the right tables, saying the right things. I was beside him for the first hour. I shook hands. I smiled. At approximately 8:15, Ryan's colleague Brad pulled him aside for what Brad said was a quick conversation about Monday's presentation. Ryan excused himself. I stood near the bar with a glass of water, and I watched my husband across the room, animated and confident and completely unaware. And I thought about April 2017 and the account on North Thomond Avenue and $342,000, and Theo being born that same month, and 8 years of dinners, and I made a decision I had technically already made, but that required one final confirmation in that specific moment in that specific room. Ryan's manager, a man named Gerald, who had always been warm to me at these events, came to stand beside me. He said, "Laura, Ryan tells me you're doing remarkable work at your firm." I said, "Thank you, Gerald. I enjoy it." He said, "Forensic analysis, that must be fascinating, finding the things people try to hide." I looked at him. I said, "Yes, that's exactly what it is." He laughed and moved on. Ryan reappeared at my elbow 10 minutes later and said, "You okay?" I said, "I'm fine." I said it the way I had been saying things for 6 months, completely, with full eye contact, with nothing in my face that wasn't meant to be there. He nodded and took my hand, and we stayed another hour. In the car on the way home, he asked if I had had a good time. I said yes. He said he thought the promotion was looking good. I said that was wonderful. He said we should plan something to celebrate. I said that sounded nice. We got home at 11:30. The house was quiet without the children. Ryan went to pour himself a drink. I went upstairs and took off the green dress and hung it in the closet and stood in the bathroom for a moment, looking at my own face in the mirror. Then I went to bed. Monday morning, Ryan was in the kitchen with coffee when the process server rang the bell at 8:47. I was upstairs. I heard the door. I heard the silence that followed. Then I heard Ryan say my name, once, from the bottom of the stairs. I came to the top of the stairs. He was holding the documents. His face had an expression I had never seen on it before. Not anger, not confusion exactly. The specific expression of a person whose architecture has just been exposed to air for the first time. He said, "Laura, what is this?" I said, "It's a divorce petition, Ryan." It was filed Friday. He said, "I don't understand." I said, "I think you do." I came downstairs. I sat at the kitchen table. He sat across from me. I told him what I knew. Not everything Susan had advised me on what to disclose at this stage, but enough. The account, the apartment, the transfers, the dates. I spoke for approximately 8 minutes. He did not interrupt. When I finished, he said, "How long have you known?" I said, 6 months. He looked at me. He said, "You knew for 6 months?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Nothing for a long time." Then he said, "The gala." I said, "Yes." He put his coffee cup down very carefully on the table, the way you put something down when your hands are not entirely reliable. I watched him understand that the last 6 months of dinners and packed lunches and company events and hand-holding in taxis had been something other than what he thought they were. The divorce proceedings are ongoing. David Chen's full analysis is part of the documentation. Susan describes our position as strong. Ryan has retained his own attorney. The children know that their parents are separating. We told them together, sitting on the couch in the living room on a Tuesday evening, in language Dr. Marcus had helped me prepare. Theo asked if it was his fault. I told him no, clearly and without qualification, and I held him until he believed me. Maya asked if she would still see her dad. I told her yes. She asked if she could have a snack. I said yes. She went to the kitchen. Theo stayed on the couch with me for a while. I kept my arm around him. I still live in the Lincoln Park apartment with the children. Ryan moved out in November. The apartment on North Damon Avenue, I learned this through discovery documents in December, has been vacated. The woman whose name was on the secondary access list has not been part of the legal proceedings directly, which is a choice I made in consultation with Susan because her involvement is not the point of what I am doing. The point is the financial fraud and the dissolution of a marriage that was built on a structure I was not informed about. Those are the things I am addressing. The rest is his to carry. People ask me whether I regret waiting 6 months. I have thought about this many times. I do not regret it. I regret the 8 years. I do not regret the 6 months. The 6 months were mine. The only 6 months in 8 years when I was operating with full information and full agency and making decisions that served my children and myself rather than a version of my life that someone else had. Decided I should inhabit, some people call what I did patience. I think of it as something more specific. I think of it as what happens when someone who is very good at finding things that are not where they are supposed to be finally turns that skill toward the person sitting across from her at the kitchen table. The results were approximately what I expected. I expected them to be enough. They were. If this story meant something to you, drop a comment. Tell me, would you have confronted him immediately or would you have waited? I want to know where your line is. Subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.